The key twisted in my lock before I even reached the door. Yeah, that's how this nightmare started, and I'm telling you, I can still hear the metal scrape. My hand froze on the doorknob, every muscle tensed up like I was about to walk into a trap, and then the latch clicked, the door creaked open, and there she was, Claudia Merrick, president of our HOA, standing in my living room with a brass master key dangling from her hand, wearing this smug little smirk like she just won the lottery at my expense. You ever seen someone so sure of themselves, you want to laugh and scream at the same time? That was her. I let her take 2 bold steps into my house before I spoke. Claudia, you do realize that every second you're standing here, my security camera is feeding straight to the sheriff's office, don't you? Her face lost all color for half a heartbeat, but then she just laughed, muttering about routine compliance checks, waving that key like it gave her the right to walk through anybody's front door. She had no clue that was mistake number 1. And before I go any further, if you've ever had your home invaded under the excuse of the rules, you know exactly what I mean, right? There's nothing routine about it. It's pure violation. Now, a little about me. My name's Daniel Reeves, and I'm not some rookie when it comes to property codes. I'm a licensed building inspector, 20 years on the job. I know every rule in the book, probably wrote half of them myself. And this house isn't just any old piece of real estate. It's the last thing my father left me before cancer took him. The walls still echo with his laugh. The floors hold the memory of his boots. And my son, he's a Marine now, comes home and calls this place his safe ground. So when someone like Claudia strolls in, acting like legacy and sacrifice mean nothing, it's not just about privacy. It's about everything we stand for. The key she twirled around like a trophy? My son swore to protect our country from exactly that kind of intrusion when he took his oath. I looked past Claudia into the entryway. The flag in my window, Marine service flag from my boy's graduation, fluttered because she'd left the door wide open. To her, it was just non-compliant fabric. To me, it was my father's voice saying, "Don't you dare back down." That flag was my line in the sand. Claudia didn't see it that way. She strutted further in, clutching her clipboard like it was a badge, scribbling notes about improper display items and safety hazards, as if she was some kind of authority figure. I watched her, not scared, but with a cold, steady anger, because every time she scribbled, she was tightening her own noose. I'd heard my neighbors whisper about her using that master key on them, too, but nobody had ever fought back. They didn't have my training, or my son standing ready to back me up. So I let Claudia feel like she was in control, let her bask in her own arrogance, because the next time she crossed that threshold, she wouldn't just be facing me. She'd be facing someone trained never to surrender. And this was her second violation. It would be her last. But Claudia didn't stop at me. The next morning, Lakeside Crest lit up like a wildfire. Half the block got fresh violation notices, each more ridiculous than the last. I stood out in the cul-de-sac, clutching my letter, while neighbors clustered around their mailboxes, comparing notes. A single mom 2 doors down got cited because her daughter's tricycle leaned against the porch rail. An elderly couple was fined for non-compliant vegetation. Their rosebush, planted in memory of their son, had grown 6 inches too high. And me? I got cited for that Marine service flag. This wasn't just harassment, it was war. Claudia was testing how much dignity she could strip away before we either bowed or broke. The neighbors kept their heads down, clutching those letters like eviction notices, too afraid to fight. Lakeside Crest was supposed to be a sanctuary, gated streets, manicured lawns, safety at every meeting. But it wasn't. It was a prison of petty rules, weaponized by a woman with a master key. I watched Claudia from across the street, clipboard in hand, her heels striking the pavement like a judge's gavel. Her smile was polite, but her eyes had that hungry, predatory scan. Every conversation ended with another violation notice slipped under a door. To most people, it just looked like routine HOA business. But to me, with 20 years of code enforcement experience, it was a straight-up abuse of power. I'd seen what legal procedure looks like, and Claudia wasn't just bending the rules. She was manufacturing violations, counting on fear and silence to keep the neighborhood under her thumb. And the stories I'd heard. Families pushed to foreclosure, people drained by legal fees, others just packing up and leaving. All those stories Claudia recycled as cautionary tales at board meetings, making sure everyone knew she was untouchable. But standing in that cul-de-sac, I saw what she didn't. She was overplaying her hand. In her quest to dominate, she left a paper trail a mile wide. Illegitimate citations, unauthorized entries. What she saw as intimidation, I saw as evidence. As neighbors drifted back inside, I caught a glimpse of Terrell Gaines, our security guard, arms folded tight, jaw clenched, watching Claudia from a distance. Terrell was always professional, followed Claudia's orders, until now. I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt. He knew this wasn't about community standards anymore. It was about control. That was the first real crack in her armor. If even her own enforcer was wavering, her power was a house of cards. And if her whole game was built on everyone's fear, breaking that illusion just once could unravel the system. So I let Claudia keep strutting, let her stack up her own mistakes, because when the time came, the evidence would be enough to expose everything: trespass, abuse, intimidation. Back home, I looked at that flag in my window, still hanging defiant, the symbol of everything Claudia couldn't understand. I knew next time she crossed my door, it wouldn't just be about me. It'd be about the whole neighborhood, about legacy, about the line she'd crossed twice. The next day, I went to the community pool, where every rule was posted in red, where parents whispered to each other, where Terrell Gaines stood watch, restless, shifting, arms folded, then dropped, then folded again. I watched him, his posture, the way his eyes followed Claudia as she barked orders at a young couple about their patio umbrella. He hesitated just a beat too long when she called him forward, and she noticed. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dropped, but the shame in Terrell's body language was plain as day. I'd seen enough hearings, enough faces. He wasn't my enemy. He was trapped. Terrell was a witness, his silence screaming louder than any protest. And that gave me leverage, real leverage. If the man behind the uniform was already doubting her, Claudia's power was built on sand. I stayed, watching every interaction, every order, every shift in the crowd. By the time the sun was setting, I knew what I had to do. The next day, Claudia called an emergency compliance session at the clubhouse, a stage set for her to flex her authority in front of the people she'd just fined into silence. The room was thick with anxiety. I brought my citation, the one about the flag, and sat with neighbors, watching Claudia hand down decrees like a queen swinging her gavel. Failure to comply means escalating fines. Legal action if necessary. She leaned on fear the way a soldier leans on a rifle. But I knew federal law was on my side. When she called my name, I stood, calm but ready. You've made two mistakes, Claudia. First, you think your clipboard gives you legal authority. It doesn't. Second, you targeted a military service flag protected under federal law. That's not a violation. That's your liability. The room went still. Neighbors who'd been beaten down suddenly sat up straighter. Claudia tried to play it off, tried to cut me off, but I pressed on. You've trespassed in my home with that key, cited people for toys and rose bushes, and now you've gone after the service flag. You want that on the record when the state investigates. I didn't need to raise my voice. The weight was in the truth. For the first time, Claudia's control slipped in public. She snapped her binder shut and fled the room. But the damage was done. Neighbors looked at me, at each other, and something changed. Fear gave way to resolve. And in the back, Terrell stood still, his hands at his sides, not fidgeting, not backing her anymore. The shift had begun. I wasted no time. The next morning, I went straight to the county office, filed the formal complaint, turned over evidence, photos, everything. The compliance officer listened, face hardening when he realized the scope: unauthorized entry, targeted harassment, federal law violated. If what you're saying holds, the HOA could be exposed to serious liability. That's what I needed, liability. Because insurance companies don't tolerate risk, and HOAs can't survive without coverage. Back in Lakeside Crest, neighbors watched me with a new kind of curiosity. Curtains twitched, people glanced up from driveways, and Terrell, by the gate, saw the stamped complaint in my hand. There was a flicker of relief on his face, like he finally saw a way out. That night, I went to the Veterans Hall, the old brick building where my father's memorial had been. I sat down with Commander Hayes, a retired colonel, and showed him Claudia's citation. That's not just an insult, he said, his jaw tight. That's unlawful. And if she thinks she can intimidate a Marine family, she's got another thing coming. Hayes promised to connect me with legal help and to rally other veterans. It wasn't just my fight anymore, it was all of ours. The next day, the story started coming, quiet at first, then louder. Neighbors told me about violations for swings, fines for bikes, even garage inspections done without permission. And Terrell? He was in all their stories too, hesitating, uncomfortable, sometimes stalling. The cracks in Claudia's power were growing. And by now, everyone could see them. Late one evening, Terrell waited for me by the playground. No uniform, just a man at the end of his rope. He confessed, "She makes me use the key. Every time. I didn't sign up for this." He told me about her records, locked in a cabinet, notes about every family, a stash of leverage waiting to blow up in her face. "If you push this complaint through, I'll back you," he said. He wanted out, and I promised he'd have it. The next morning, I marched into the insurance carrier's office and laid everything on the table: the complaint, the citations, Terrell's confession. The manager's face went pale at the mention of lawsuits. Money talks, and suddenly, Claudia's empire wasn't just at risk, it was on the verge of collapse. By now, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. People weren't whispering anymore. They were planning. I organized a meeting at the library. 15 families showed up, stories and evidence piling higher than ever. Terrell arrived, this time not as Claudia's enforcer, but as a whistleblower. She ordered me to use the key. I hated it. I'm done covering for her. The silence broke. People shared stories, determined to stand together. Then came the final showdown. At the next board meeting, the clubhouse was packed. No more scattered chairs and bowed heads. I stood up, laid the complaint on the table, and said, "This meeting is about your unlawful actions, Claudia." I called out the citation against my son's flag, the trespassing, the fabricated fines. Neighbors gasped, voices rose, and then Terrell stood up and backed me, right there in front of everyone. The room erupted. Anger, relief, a call for Claudia to step down. Claudia tried to regain control, but it was gone. Lost in a wave of unity she could never stop. Within days, the county investigator and insurance rep came through, listening to every story. The HOA's coverage was suspended, the board paralyzed, and a special election ousted Claudia and her cronies by a landslide. For the first time in years, Lakeside Crest belonged to its residents, not to a dictator with a clipboard. My home felt safe again, my flag a little brighter. And I realized it was never just about one house, or one family, or even one flag. It was about everyone's right to feel safe in their own home. So what do you think? Was standing up worth the risk? Tell me below, have you ever dealt with HOA abuse, or fought back when the system seemed stacked against you? Drop your story in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to share this with anyone who needs to hear it. Because once a community finds its voice, it doesn't go quiet again.